Ford saloons are no more. With the death of the Mondeo announced quite recently, now your only option for a big luxurious Ford is some heinous SUV thing. So we thought we'd go back to the heyday of the big blue oval saloon car that made you feel good about yourself. The Mk1 Granada arguably embodied that ethos better than any other big Ford. And thanks to Drive Dad's Car here in Matlock, Bath, I'm going to take this 2500 GXL for a drive and explain why. But first, our friends at Lancaster Insurance are running monthly giveaways. You can win all sorts, from experience days to tools, restaurant vouchers and tech. So click the link below at the end of the video to enter their latest competition. The unification of Ford Europe and Ford Britain had started with the Mark III Cortina, or Taunus, which had come to be known as the TC Cortina. The next car to get the treatment would be the replacement to Ford Britain's Zephyr and Ford Europe's P7, their bigger, more luxurious saloon. Now, initially this car was going to be called the Granada, but in Britain at least that would present an issue because the Granada group threatened to sue for rights to the name. So initially the new car would be called the Consul Granada, particularly in lower trim levels. Ultimately though, this turned out to be an empty threat from Granada to sue Ford, and by 1975 the name Granada on its own stuck. The project for the Zephyr and P7 replacement had started as early as 1968 using an Americana-inspired Coke bottle style design. And when you see the final results that culminated in the Ford Granada, you can see some real American influence from it. The swooping curves, the lashings of chrome. I think this is a cracking bit of design. It's classy, it's imposing, and it's stylish. Even in fairly basic trim levels, the Mk1 Granada is a really good looking car that you'd aspire to have on your driveway. And that theme continued to the inside of the Granada, where you've got this massive wood dashboard, these lovely chrome trimmed bezel gauges, this big steering wheel and these lovely soft leather seats. Yes, this is a European sized car, but you feel to all intents and purposes like you're driving a baby Cadillac or Buick. It feels fantastic, and these big soft leather armchairs in this GXL are fantastically comfortable. It was classic American inside and out then, but under the skin the Granada was altogether more modern. Coil sprung independent rear end, double wishbone front suspension. Now the journalists loved the way the Granada drove. They said it offered the best combination of handling and ride comfort of any car in its class, and it even challenged some more expensive cars. Now nearly 50 years on, does that ring true? Well, it's definitely a big old boat. The Granada rolls around and leans. The steering is fairly direct actually for such a big car. It's quite light power assisted in this GXL here, but you've got a good idea of where the front end's going. You certainly don't feel like you're captaining a canal boat down this fairly narrow road here. The ride is phenomenal. It's incredibly smooth, floaty. I can barely tell there are any bumps in the road. For a car this size, it's remarkably composed, and actually even if you really fling it into a corner, you don't feel like you're going to end up on the passenger seat. Here at Drive Dad's Car, they've got this slalom area. Let's give it a little go. It's incredibly composed. I'm not flailing at the steering wheel here. The front end's not running away from me. That feels great. More impressive yet was the range of engines in the Granada. Initially you could get the Ford V4 and later the Pinto engine, and you could also get the Essex V6 in 2.5 like this car here, or 3 litre guys. In the European market you could have the Granada with the Cologne V6, but that was nothing compared to the South African market Granada Piranha, which featured a massive V8. That is a properly cool car. If you get one of those, you've got a rarity that everyone at a classic Ford meet will want to look at. This Essex V6 though is lovely. It's silky smooth, it's torquey, and if I put my foot down, oh, lovely distant rumble. In 1974, Ford acquired Ghia, and that same year we got a top spec Granada trim level, the Granada Ghia, and that was a luxurious, aspirational car which, if you couldn't quite stretch to a Jaguar or Mercedes, offered 95% of the luxury in a Ford, a blue-collar brand. The Granada quickly became the big saloon to own, whether you were an aspiring executive sales rep or an aspiring cop watching the Sweeney, where these cars got slid around the streets of London, and that really gave the Granada Granada its street cred. And that's the thing, despite being Ford's big, more upmarket saloon, the Granada really was all things to all people. There were a plethora of trim levels, a good choice of engines. You could have it as a saloon, or a two-door fastback coupe, properly call that one, or even an estate car. There was a Granada to suit pretty much everyone, and if you wanted to be just a little bit better than the bloke in the Cortina, the Granny really was the perfect way to do it. And it worked. The style, the comfort, the lovely drive, and that mass appeal helped the Granada on to be a massive success. For some context, the Zephyr and the Zodiac sold a combined 150,000 cars, there or thereabouts. The Granada, 500,000 units in Mark 1 guys alone. It cemented Ford's crown as the big but working class luxury saloon to be seen in, and it segued on to the Mark II Granada, a car which did even better, selling nearly 1 million units. Ford defined blue-collar luxury throughout the 70s and the early 80s into the Mark III Granada, and that crown stayed right up until the slightly controversial frog-faced Scorpio. Now that's a story for another day, but for now we can drive the Mark I Granada and remember quite how good big Ford saloons are. In America, the Crown Victoria has been cancelled, Ford of Australia no longer exist, making the ubiquitous Falcon, and in the UK we don't even get the Mondeo, let alone the Scorpio or Granada. And when you drive a lovely example of an iconic, much loved classic like this Mark I Granada, that makes that all the more of a pity.
This video is proudly sponsored by Lancaster Insurance. Give them a call on 01480 400 889 for an insurance quote on your classic car. And don't forget to click the link below to enter their latest competition.